You know, folks, a lot of people have been dogging Trump based on his hatred of minorities. It's gotten to the point where nobody ever has to tether it to any measurable standard of accountability and debate. They merely assert that Donald Trump is a racist, and therefore anybody who would be in any way, shape, or form comfortable with his presidency, therefore must be, by extension, a racist as well. Folks, it's just not the case. You see, when people make assertions of racism without premise, you're actually committing racism in the name of fighting it. Because all you've done is you've essentially used race to intimidate dissent, thus fulfilling the very definition of racism. This is all tied into identity politics. You merely associate a particular politic with an ethnic or racial group. And that way you can characterize opposition to those politics as somehow being tantamount to opposition to that racial or ethnic group. For instance, socialism is now called social justice. And that social justice has been tethered to a number of racial and identity groups. So now, if you wish to be critical of socialism, they now characterize that as an attack against the racial group behind which that socialism has been both placed and renamed. That's intellectually bereft, because by that measure, we're never able to agree and disagree about politics without it being somehow connected to a racial component. Folks, that is intolerable and unacceptable and intellectually impoverished. It makes no sense whatsoever. It makes zero sense whatsoever. Because, believe it or not, there is a difference between issues relevant to racial conflict versus issues relevant to conflict that just might transpire between people who are not of the same race. In other words, a black guy and a white guy can argue over the same things that might be argued by two blacks, two Hispanics, two Asians, two Middle Easterners. But for some reason, if the people sharing a disagreement happen to not be of the same ethnic or racial makeup, bingo bango, it must be a racial conflict. It's not the case, folks. If we're all equal in potential with our capabilities, the same must be true with our fallibilities. Par with the good, par with the bad. So please remember, if you're going to make assertions of racism without premise, you really will be committing racism in the name of fighting it and fooling nobody.